That's around where the old toilet used to be.
It's quite an entertaining film, if you've got to
Oh, I do believe it. That's the line from Peter Pan.
Right, good afternoon. Welcome to the first of the general meetings this year. Welcome to the new members, or member, and look forward to an informative year. Right, I don't think I need to go through the evacuation process. I think everybody here knows how to get off the building. Item number 2 is apologies. I have apologies from Councillor A. Sargent, Councillor Roy Smith, substitute, Councillor J. Tandy, substitute, Councillor Rudkin, I'm going to get that right sometime, Councillor Doherty, substitute, W.J. Hancock, and also Lynn Price. She sent her apologies. Are they all right with everybody? Yeah. Can I sign can I sign the 9th of May minutes?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah.
Declarations of interest. Remember to declare any interest not included in the schedule. Is that all right?
We have it. We have it.
Chairman, there's a correction on declaration of interest against my name. I'm not a member of the Police and Crime Panel. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm out of step, but I'm just anxious to make that clear. I'm not a member of the Police and Crime Panel.
Can we record that and get it changed accordingly? Yeah. We'll do that, Councillor.
Thank you.
Public consultation. We have no public speakers at all. Which takes us to item number 6 on the agenda, managing attendance of the council workforce. Ruth and Chris, are you doing the double act here?
I'm here in
Okay,
support.
okay.
So, afternoon, councillors. The report just details the sickness performance for 2018-19 and gives some background data. So there's various charts within there. Our target for last year was overall 8.75 FTE days, but we did not meet that target. However, we did have a reduction in short-term absence, which was higher the year before. There are, as I said, various charts in there, including some benchmarking data against other authorities. And the various charts, I would draw your attention to what's referenced as chart 4 is actually chart 3. And that shows that percentage of days available lost to sickness was 4%, which means that the council worked 96% capacity, and over 50% of the workforce did not have any absence due to sickness at all last year. So that's a summary. I'm happy to take any questions or queries on the report.
Any comments from the panel? Councillor Condon?
Thank you very much, Chair. It's really high always, absenteeism in big organisations, and obviously we have people working front line that have very stressful jobs, and things like seasonal flu are a massive influence. And this last year we had less flu just nationally as well. So do we have anything to break down how much is seasonal flu and how much in terms of, so if we had a worse seasonal flu in the coming year, we'd expect to have an even worse sickness, because obviously these things are to tie in.
Yes, I mean we do have that data. We can see the data in chart 1 is the data by the top 4 regions by month, and actually flu was lower in the top 4 regions, in the top regions at all. There was a spike around December time, but generally cold and flu absence is quite low throughout the year. We've had an increase in gastro illnesses this year. That's come into our top 4. But in comparison to the other top 3, even that's quite low, to be fair. But our issue this year has been long-term absences.
Go on in, Councillor.
And following on from that, if we have a worse flu year coming up, one of the things we really need to do is get a good flu vaccination, because, so we've got off lucky this year. Have we got a programme to actually try and...
We've had a programme of flu vaccinations in the past, and the take-up has been very, very low. So we do advertise out that obviously certain individuals with certain conditions can get a flu vaccine from their GP, but in terms of us funding it, the take-up has been very low. I mean,
We didn't do it, did we?
we didn't do it, we have done it the last 2 years, and the last year we did it was about 2 people. So,
If I may, Chair, one final point is very much about flexible working, agile working and various things, because obviously as we've got an older workforce, some people can't cope, particularly on the bins and some of the more stressful jobs, and housing officers and those sort of jobs, with actually having a full-time job. Are we doing a lot to actually sort of enable people to work more flexible, so yes, go on to 2 days a week or 3 days a week, so that actually they can actually cope longer and have less stress issues?
yeah, case by case, where there's a medical issue, we look at all of those issues, so whether they need to work in a different department, whether they need adjusted duties or reduced hours, we look at it case by case generally.
But it's not proactively offered to the workforce to deal.
Well, agile working is available to office-based. In terms of our flexible working policy, that's out there, people are aware of it. It's more difficult in manual roles like refuse and trade operatives, and that is where normally it's case by case.
Anybody else from the panel? Councillor Rumford.
Thank you, Chair. Just before, I just wanted to stop here. Appendix A in our reports, which looks at the service unit by breakdown. Just remind me, am I reading this correctly? Operations would be the bins operatives, for example, being included in there.
Yes.
The housing, communities and economic development. Which sections would be included in that? Because that seems particularly high.
Yeah, so that would be trade operatives, so plumbers, carpenters. That's a lot of musculoskeletal absence in that area. And then the housing officers, private sector housing, those are all within housing and communities.
So it still remains the sort of the manual jobs. So what are we doing about ensuring we have perhaps improving and health and safety training, for example, and other proactive measures, particularly with musculoskeletal, that we can look to potentially try and now take a more proactive approach to try and tackle particularly the issues in those roles?
So HR work quite closely with the sports development team, and actually only 2 weeks ago we did physio triage sessions up at the depot, which is where most of the manual workforce are based. People could book on those just for an assessment, any exercise tips in terms of musculoskeletal. We're also about to launch a Thrive at Work survey, which looks at wellbeing and health, and that will be split up into several sections, some of which about physical activity and injury and all of those sort of things, so we can use that data to then go out and be more proactive.
So we're hoping to, at the moment then, if I may, Chair, we're looking at the data collection at the moment to then begin a bit more of a proactive push in future.
I mean, we are still quite proactive. We will go out and give tips and tips and everything. Physio sessions, that's open to everybody. But the data collection will help us target it a lot more.
So this time next year, hopefully we'll see a lower level in that then.
Hopefully, yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Just to be clear, Chair, there is a programme of manual handling training, working at height, etc., which is proactively managed through the service areas, and therefore all staff who are affected by manual handling do have that training regularly. So particularly the bin operatives, and particularly those who do pull-outs are trained and have to be refreshed every year on that basis.
I'm sure, but if the levels are high, perhaps we should be looking at that, and is it achieving what it's supposed, are the results being achieved, or could we potentially improve those programmes further? I think there's always, in anything we all do, there's always room for improvement. I think it's really important that we look to make that where possible, particularly for those that have got the toughest physical jobs that we're responsible for. Thank you, Chair.
I think that's, everybody happy about it, happy with the report, and the initiatives already used to reduce sickness absence, etc. And the last offenders is someone as though we are proactive. And if there's any blips in the data, hopefully we should be able to pick them up relatively easily and then try and deal with it as it happens. Okay, everybody happy with the report then?
Yes, Chair.
Yep. Thank you. Item number 7, the integral performance report, page 25 for those who... Philip, do you want to say anything?
Yes, Chair, I'll just sort of introduce the item, and then I think I'll throw it over to questions, and Chris and I between us will endeavour to assist members with any answers. The first thing I just wanted to highlight, and I'm highlighting it for a particular reason which I'll tell you about, is in the report itself, in the covering report, section 3 refers to the Regulation of Investigative Powers Act. You will note that there have been no covert surveillance operations undertaken by the Borough Council since the last meeting. I'm flagging that because we have had a letter from the Surveillance Commissioner asking us to complete a questionnaire, a part of which is, do our members get a report and oversight of the use of this power? And we say yes, because we bring it to this panel. So I'm just flagging it formally for you that you are discharging a function on behalf of the Surveillance Commissioner, and that will then determine whether or not we have an inspection, a light touch inspection or a proper inspection. So part of doing this is simply to keep them at bay as long as we can. In terms of the report itself, Chair, it's pretty much as set out. I would just highlight one matter, and it's actually set out on the addendum, and that is that you'll see that the report originally was suggesting a 200,000 plus outturn. You'll see that with some what we call unders and overs, particularly capital depreciation, that's now been whittled down to effectively a variance now of £25,000. So that's the actual outturn position as set out. And you have the table on the back of the addenda which shows that the outturn was 37,000 under budget against a projection of 12,000. I don't profess to be an accountant, so if anybody has any technical questions on this, I'd be pleased if you could refer them to Chris. Beyond that, Chair, I think if members want to ask questions, it'd be simple to deal with it on that.
Any questions from the panel members? Councillor Cottico?
I'm not sure if we're going through the full report item by item or if we're just doing the top line now, or this is the only opportunity to question, because there's quite a lot of issues obviously in the report. I mean, your guidance would be most useful.
Our intention was for to put the report in front of you, and if you notice, rather than going through line by line by line by line, we're assuming that everybody has actually read the report, and if they've got anything they wish to say on the report, they should bring it up rather than us going through parrot fashion, line by line.
In that case, Chair, I've got quite a few items I found over the breakfast table. Firstly, the complaints and freedom of information requests are quite massive, the number that are outside 20 working days. And yeah, we get something like 1,000 complaints and 770 freedom of information requests, and we really shouldn't be running at about a third of them for FOIs and a quarter of them for complaints outside the target times. And we should be also looking at how we can reduce the number of requests and complaints. But actually we've got a big table in the back which doesn't tell us anything about what the issues are. It's totally meaningless apart from knowing what department it comes through. So I think actually to know what we're what we're asking would be far more useful than actually giving the reference number. And in particular, there are some astronomically large times. There's one on page 58 of 174 days for a freedom information request that is still open. So I think if we rather than just lots of pages, actually just tell us a couple of lines on the ridiculous ones would be most useful. And there is so much we have to put freedom information requests in for because the council's not publishing information. So I think we should do a triage to see if we actually published on our website information, would this request have needed to have been made? Because it wastes a lot of effort doing 776 FOIs. So that's the first point. I don't know if you want to take an answer to that.
Yeah, Chris is probably better placed to do that.
First of all, just on the lateness, Councillor Fundapper is right, there are some that are over 20 days. Although this report isn't showing you where we've actually asked for more information. We go out, sometimes it's not very clear what the freedom of information request is, so we ask for more information, and that's not reflected here. So this is a snapshot for the end, really. I usually report in more detail to this group on a half-yearly basis, where you have more detail. And I have done in the past, I think, Councillor, I've brought one where you get an example and I show a little bit more detail around what the request was, and I've done it on the complaints as well. I can do something like that. I think I did a 3-month sort of sample, because it's very difficult to capture. They're all different. Although they're under services, that's who's responding, the scenarios and the requests are varied, I have to say. So it's very difficult to be able to categorise like that. I think I'd be better off, like I did before. I think I brought a report, different panel, but I brought a report just a sample of 3 months, and I anonymised it, but I left in what the request was about, so you could actually read the types. But I only did a 3-month because, as you say, it's rather long. So I could do something like that.
Councillor Conley, do you have anything else?
Yeah, on the addendum, we've got this massive overspend, which then gets reversed out of £824,000, which then shows as a massive error in our forecasting. A lot of that has been put down to depreciation. So can I ask, why did we get the depreciation estimates so badly wrong, if that is part of the reason? And also, I mean, effectively we've said we spent 14.7 million and we spent 15.5 million. So the top level portfolio totals are out by £824,000, which is getting for £1 million. So I do think, rather than say we haven't got any financial expertise at the top table, we do actually want a bit of a breakdown as to why the estimates were so far out. And depreciation is actually your assets becoming less valuable. So yeah, if we're actually having a revaluation, which is why we've got so much depreciation, why is the value of our assets going down?
I can't answer those, I'm afraid. That's too much detail for me. I'll have to take them back.
I think one of the principal reasons, Chair, is because there was a rates revaluation mid-year which had a negative impact. So, for example, when you look at the outturn for the Civic Hall, for example, there was a £69,000 increase in rateable value of payable, which is what accounts for the overspend or apparent overspend on the Civic Hall. And that obviously has affected all council assets through the whole of our estate. So that sort of fed through. How that all translates into the final amount, I don't know. You'd have to ask Craig that question. So we can get a written answer for that.
Can I just follow up on that? Because you're actually saying the Civic Hall's worth more than we expected, which is why it made a bigger loss. Is that
Yes, the rateable values went up.
I think we probably would help, Chair, if we had a little note explaining that change.
I think that's perfectly reasonable. We should do that. Get get something right to the panel members. Anything else, Councillor?
There's a few things actually in the report itself. There's the things like the on page 44 about the car park being decommissioned, which is obviously being built on at the moment. And it'd be useful to know if we know whether that park has been displaced to other car parks. Obviously we've added a few more spaces here, because obviously we don't want to lose income or drive away trains. So we do want to understand a bit in terms of whether there was a step drop in parking income when the car park closed, or whether we did actually manage to move it across. And obviously we've got a continued issue with the market stall occupancies that keeps falling and falling and falling, which I think we do need to have a look at, because we set a target every year and every year it comes under target and under target. And I see that we're actually underspent on the town centre promotion. So in the past, planning Ananotti used to actually spend some budget on actually putting adverts in and trying to get some publicity about the town and getting people in. So if we're underspent on publicity and the market's suffering, are we spending our promotional budget?
Anybody want to answer that? No. Let's find out the information. So it's the same as with the car parking. I know there's a car parking working party to be set up, and perhaps that should be directed towards that car parking working party. So we can come back to this panel in the not too distant future. Okay. Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Chair. If we can just go back to the freedom of information detail. There's, I think, 226 listed, yeah? Is that right?
According to this report, yeah. Sorry,
I
I didn't provide these figures. So.
Oh, you might not be able to answer that, but I'll ask the question. I'm just interested, obviously they're all separate reference numbers, separate complaints. But I'm just wondering how many of them, say, come from a person, a particular person. Because I'm aware of, you know, some people that I know that make multiple requests. So
yes, there will be multiple requests from the same.
I was just wondering how many, but you don't.
I don't know. No, I would be guessing if I put it out.
If I can make comments about in HR, by no means do we get many FOIs, but I would say about 95% are from third-party companies just fishing for information.
FOIs definitely. Complaints though. Complaints, yes, you often get the same complainant on different topics, but they're counted as one complaint. We do have a policy, if it becomes vexatious, we can invoke that policy, but I don't think we've done last year.
Not recently.
No. We have got better. We have actually got better in terms of responding, and I'm hoping this year we're even better. But, and I know you do get a report at the end, don't you? You get a report of all of the complaints at the end, but I think we've changed the half-year reporting that I used to do. I think we've changed that. But as I say, I can provide information.
Any other panel members? Councillor?
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to come back to one of my pets is continuing overrunning costs in refuse and street cleansing, because we seem to do every year, or every time the report comes to us with these costs, we do incredibly poorly on this, specifically often in relation to our huge agency costs. And it does concern me that we don't seem to be having initiatives that keep being told are coming in not necessarily quickly enough. We see in the report, page 32, 3 million of the outturn in that central services and refuse, 3 million of the additional, rephrase that. We see most of the outturn in that the additional spend in that department coming again from the increase in agency budget, and that really does concern me that it's something that comes up every time. It's something that is continually raised and we don't seem to be getting on top of, because under the report we can quite clearly see that pretty much as always we are in terms of making sure we suddenly end up in the black at the end of the year, we end up having overly reliant upon development control and planning policy income that's not necessarily going to be there forever. So what are we doing to ensure that actually our budgets are more balanced from the start, and we haven't got an over-reliant or an overspending continually from one department and a continual pulling us back from another, because that to me is not particularly a sound way to continue going forwards.
Kristen?
I think we have got some work that we've been doing.
So we've done a recent recruitment drive within Refuse, and majority of the agency staff have been taken on permanently, directly employed by council as from March. So we should see quite a reduction in the agency costs on Refuse now. There are only 2 agency staff there who get used for sickness cover really. So all of the others are directly employed.
And I think, as I said before, Chair, that there is particularly when it comes to drivers, I think we do look to, because of the importance of getting the refuse collected, that we will use drivers from street cleansing, which I know is new to the service for street cleansing, but it does mean that we're getting the bins emptied, and I think we see that as our priority. So we do that to a degree as well, so that the service continues. But clearly, it is one of those services that you cannot run on a shoestring, and therefore it does mean that you have to get people in if you haven't got anybody else, and it is particularly drivers where we're particularly vulnerable.
On that note, on drivers, we've also asked internal staff if they would be willing to undergo driving, so that we would have more drivers that can cover internally rather than seek agency cover. So that's happened in the last couple of months.
I don't dispute what Director Richardson said. I think the problem becomes though is when we continually have overspends against budgets. Every time we have an update coming in front of us, particularly over the last financial year, and even into the particularly over the financial year. Municipal year we've just finished, and at the end of the last financial year, this is one department that continually is heavily over variance. So I don't dispute the fact that it needs to be done. It's got to be done, of course it has. But when you're continually budgeting and continually overspending year on year and quarter on quarter, then perhaps we need to look at that from the start and say, well, actually, is the budget realistic to start with? Are we setting unreasonable expectations, or is there a reason for a continuing overspend, and what can we do necessarily to get a grip on that? It's got to be one or the other. And I think that's something we need to assess going forward, because the concern for me continues to be that you've got a massive overspend there, which is pretty much negated by the time you come to the income, purely from development control planning, largely from development control and planning policy applications, and they're not necessarily going to continue forever.
Yeah.
So that would be my point upon more overarching, that maybe is not quite necessarily directed at the portfolio, officers, directors we've got here this evening.
And I think it's fair to say, Chair, that we have had that discussion at the management team around whether or not we need to recalibrate the budget to allow for that particular issue, because it is a continual problem that has not been addressed by budget setting, I don't think. So it is something that I think Simone is looking at.
Thank you, Chair.
Is there any other member before I bring Councillor Condicott back in again? Councillor Condicott?
On the problems we've got with refuse and cleansing, we were supposed to recalibrate our routes, because obviously we've had some new housing built, and we've had the green bin scheme, which means the green bins have less to collect. And obviously that will save staff's time and could cut our agency costs down if we actually recalibrate our routes, so that we don't have short days when drivers are hanging around drinking coffee, and then have really busy days because they've got days when they've got hundreds or even 1,000 extra houses. So why isn't that recalibration of routes happened to actually balance out our routes and potentially save some of the agency staff trying to run, say, 6 trucks, when actually, if you actually, particularly for the green bin waste where we've got less to collect, we could actually save some effort.
I think that is actually happening as we're sitting here. That is in fact happening because of the green waste as well. Obviously, we needed that to come in and to see what the effect of that was. And with that and that information, I think they are looking at the routing.
So going forward, there is about to be a recalibration of the routes.
I think more than that. not just that.
And the final point on this report, if I may, Chair, the strategic risk register wasn't given to us, and there's a link which you can't type in because it's highlighted and it's on paper. But when you do look at the risk register, there are a lot of things we need to update on that. So I do hope we can bring the risk register to this committee, particularly to look at what happens with the borough plan and going forward how it's implemented, because obviously there's a lot of new risks if you've got a plan. There's a risk of not having a plan, and then there's a risk of having a plan and it not being achievable. And secondly, we notice a lot of empty flats, particularly in Attleborough, the new council-owned ones that aren't getting filled. And so there's a risk to our finances if NABCEL are buying up flats and, due to the economic situation, not being able to rent them out. So can I ask that the risk register actually gets presented properly to us at the next panel?
Philip, have we got any?
Well, it's a decision of panel, Chairman, we can do that if that's the wish of the panel.
Is that the wish of the panel? Yeah. Okay. We shall try and get that for the next panel then, yeah. Any other, anything else from the report? The first thing that Philip brought up about the Snoopers Charter of whatever it was called.
Regulation of Investigation.
Yes.
That's the correct title.
This is one of those shooting the fox sort of thing. Oh, this happens all over the place, and it's never happened here. It's just that I'm going to say it was Orwell speak, but perhaps George Orwell wouldn't have been so precise as that. But as far as I know, we've never did that in the borough, and as far as I know, I can't remember anything.
We have used it, Chair, but you've got to go back probably 6 years plus to when it was last used, and it tended to be, it was particularly when we had fraud investigations as part of the finance functions, and there were benefit fraud in particular, so there was a need from time to time for benefit fraud officers to undertake some form of covert surveillance, so they would, but that obviously had to go through a process. We don't tend to use it for regulatory enforcement, planning or environmental health. If we do that kind of enforcement, we tend to do it very overtly to make people aware that it's going on. So, but by its very nature, benefit fraud was something that had to be done to catch them at it, so to speak, which meant it was done. So we haven't done it for a very long time.
Yeah, I shall stand corrected to that, but it's not an every day occurrence.
Oh,
every other day occurrence.
And I have to say, Chair, we're not alone in that, which is why the Surveillance Commissioner is actually asking the question, because up until now, every 3 years, we've had an inspection from a High Court judge in some cases, and I think that they're taking the view that it may be disproportionate to do that if we've not actually done anything. Having said that, they always like to come look at CCTV, because obviously, whilst it's not, we don't do it covertly, obviously it does capture an awful lot of information, so they do like to make sure that there are robust procedures in place to protect privacy for the CCTV systems. But beyond that, and having a lovely day out in Nuneaton and Bedworth, it serves very little purpose. So I suspect that they will be scaling down their inspection visits to those where they've got particular issues. They might want to come look at our CCTV, but we'll see.
Okay then. With all the points mentioned about the report and the things that are going to come back, can I move on to the next item now? Yep. Item number 8. Philip.
Yes, Chair. This is a refresh of the document that members, certainly the older members, will have seen and be familiar with, which has been updated very kindly by Wendy, which to reflect, in effect, the current scrutiny arrangements. We thought it would be helpful for this to be made available to members going forward and members of the public, and we were suggesting that it would be a good place for it would be to put it into the Constitution, so it's there for all to see and to guide members and members of the public around scrutiny and what it is, how we use it, what we do, etc., etc. As I think I've said many times, one of the issues I feel quite strongly, and I'm sticking my neck out here, but I'm going to do it anyway, that real scrutiny is very hard to do in a meeting like this. And it's much better when you do it through working parties or select committees where you can actually call witnesses, you can hear evidence from the horse's mouth, so to speak, and you can form a proper view. And we haven't done it very often, or certainly recently, but when we do site reference visits where we go and look at other places and see how other people do things, sometimes that just gives an insight into changes that could be brought back into the organisation here that might improve matters. So this guide is there really to help members to appreciate the full breadth of what could be done if members were so inclined to do so. Obviously, it does necessitate, and we'll come on to this when you start talking about your work programme, actually having some meaty items to put on the work programme, but it's certainly something I would commend to you and invite you to approve so that we can take it forward.
Any panel members, any questions? Councillor Condico?
The first thing is you mentioned going on the website and constitution and things. It's great for the public to see these things, but our constitution's not up to date on the website even at the moment. So I do think we want, if we're doing this, we want to have a public access, whatever page on the website that has a constitution, this document and any other petition documents, and make things a bit more visible. Because my wife tried to put a question in for Monday's council, and the constitution is not there with all the changes. So how on earth people can get involved with the council if the constitution's not online, let alone the scrutiny thing? Secondly, we have co-opted members, and I don't think they're fully reflected through this document, particularly on page 128, where it talks about elected members and one or two expert. I think we need to actually make sure that the co-opted members are mentioned better in this, because they do bring a lot of valuable experience, and although they don't vote, they actually can play, particularly on working groups, an important role. If you're struggling to get 3 or 4 members to a working group, one of the co-opted members, I know we've done some in the past where they've been very valuable, so I do hope we look at that. And then we had the issue with the scrutiny suggestion from a member of the public about the canal extension at Griff, and he wasn't informed when an item was coming back to be discussed at the meeting as to whether it was going to be dropped or not. So I do think we need to tighten up actually keeping the public informed when they actually put forward a work programme item. Thank you, Chair.
Mrs Ross?
Chair, may I ask if there is a co-opted member on any of the cabinet meetings?
No, I think so.
No, not on the cabinet.
No cabinet, no.
Is there a reason for that?
I suspect it, I don't quote me, but I think it may be for legal reasons that cabinet executive members have to be elected members rather than co-opted members. But beyond that, I don't know.
Could we find out the answers?
Yeah, I can.
We can perhaps get an answer. I'm sure Philip's right what he's saying about executives a bit different from the rest of the council.
And Chair, if I could just mention, because Councillor Gandar made reference to the Griff Arm, and just to be clear, that was an issue dealt with by this panel when it was considering its work programme, and the fact that it hadn't been able to progress it, and therefore the panel took a decision not to proceed. We wouldn't normally, we wouldn't know from anything else. We wouldn't normally inform a member of the public that it would just happen at the meeting in the normal way. So that's a decision of the panel, and that's it. The panel manages its own affairs and makes its own decisions. So I take the point, it would be nice to be able to do these things, but it's not always possible to do in the circumstances.
Anything else in overview and scrutiny guide? Performing council, can you call back in any other councillor? Councillor?
Final thing I noticed was in the list of appendix, the glossary, which is very useful, there's a whole load of things in there that are no longer really happen, like local area agreements and whatever. So as things have been added in, like the Westminster Combined Authority, it probably is worth giving it a prune, so it doesn't actually include all these acronyms of things that we no longer do.
We can certainly look at it. We've got, yes, local agenda 20 and things like that, Chair. I guess my reticence is that these things tend to come around in cycles, and if we wait long enough, it will come back in. But no, I take the point.
Yeah. Anybody else? With the constitution being on the internet, etc.
We are.
Can we make sure that
we are in the process of updating it, Chair. As you know, a raft of changes went through in April, so we're just updating to get it. And what we would like to do is get it online, and then we'd like to, those members that would like a hard copy will be sending a note out to all members to say if you want it, let us know and we'll get copies to you.
Councillor?
Sorry, Chair, just a point following on from just what Philip said. Do we envisage that's going to be ready for the extraordinary meeting then?
Not
because it'd be very difficult for members to exercise certain points they might want to raise, whether having to now quote the relevant sections 3.212 if such a document doesn't exist.
I'm trying to think. I think in the agenda we put the key things on things like points of order, which have changed slightly, and point of present explanation. Actually, in the cabinet, the council agenda, we've actually put the updated version there. So I think you could refer to those. In terms of the other changes, I'm not sure that they specifically affect the rules of debate. I know those.
It's the council procedure rules section. I think is the most important.
Yeah. Yeah. If you leave that with me, Chair, what I'll try and do is get a revised version, because it was obviously it was the version that went to council in April would be the version, so I can circulate that to all members just if they want to have a copy of that available.
That might be helpful, if just even if it's not the final formatted version, but for members to know, to be able to act in accordance.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry for that.
Anybody else on the panel before bringing Councillor Condicor back in again? Councillor?
I was just going to make the same point. We do need, for Monday's meeting, to actually know what the rules are, and also the public, if they ask questions or make a statement at Monday's meeting, they need to know whether the free sentence rule applies and all these things, because it'd be a laughing stock for questions to get rejected on a change of constitution that's not been published.
Well, I'm sure that
Well,
that would help for Monday.
if we had questions in, we'd advise. We've had statements already. We've had a number of statements in, so and they're fine. So if there was some issue with a question that did come in, we would advise them accordingly, and they can amend it as they see fit.
Okay. Everybody happy with that? We'll move on to item number 10, the forward plan, which is for information only. And item number 11, the work programme. Now, we have Wendy, do you want to take this? Wendy sent an email out to see if anybody wanted anything for the work programme for the forthcoming year for the panel. And I understand with nothing received.
The zoning silence, Chair.
The definite silence. So my request to the panel is, if you feel that there's something that we should be looking at throughout this year, which concerns this internal panel, please have a look at it and see and get it submitted, so we can actually have a look at things and try and do them and when we can, to get the information out, because if we only have the stuff that's in front of us at the present moment, we're going to run out of things to have a look at very, very shortly. So, can everybody have a look to see what they would like to do? And I know the deputy chair has mentioned something to me, but I understand he hasn't put anything in writing as yet. But I would encourage him to put it in writing, and I would encourage anybody else who wants something brought up, who's got reflected anything it does in this panel, to do the same. Councillor Condicott?
It was raised when the local council tax support scheme was discussed at full council that actually quite a few things have changed, and it was something that we might need to look at in the next municipal year. This was obviously around the time of the budget, wasn't it? We looked at the local council tax support scheme. So I think it is an area we do actually need to look at it, because it hasn't been properly studied for a while. Each year it's usually not for calling, it comes in really late and we have to approve the local council tax support scheme for next year. So I think we do need to actually have a look at it in good time. So actually if members do want to make the scheme more generous or understand how it's working, then we should have that as an item. The other item I think is desperately need doing is empty homes, because we had an empty homes officer who was really effective and he got transferred to doing other work. We've got empty NABSAL homes. We've got, if you look at the budget, we've got a massive problem, a massive overspend on rate rebates and all sorts of things. So our empty homes is something we really should look at.
Councillor, can I pray your goodwill? Could you put these things in writing and present them to the
I'll send the forms to you.
I will do, Chair. I just wanted to pre-warn you that there were things, because the officers could have told me that there were already something happening with them.
Well, there probably is, Chair. In fact, on empty homes I know there is, but it's still something that the panel may still wish to have oversight of and scrutinise. So it's a perfectly legitimate request.
Yes, I accept that. But I'll set that for what it is and see if we can get that up. Plus, if there's anything else anybody can think about with reference to this panel, please put it in writing and let's get something that we can actually scrutinise. Even if it means a couple of 3 working parties to get into the nitty-gritty before it comes back to this panel, I would suggest that councils do that. Any other panel members got anything to say? No. In that case, I shall close the meeting. I haven't got any other business, and thank you for your attendance and safe journey home.